What define our trait? Physical trait, genetic. Our gene determine our natural hair color. Environment, exposure to sunlight. Exposure to sun or hair dyes can easily change that color. What types of trait exist? Physical trait, behavioral trait. What is a trait? Trait is a notable feature or a quality in a person. Each of us has a different type of physical traits are characteristic of one's physical makeup. These include hair color, eye color. Behavioral traits are characteristic of one way, one shepherd took herding instinct and retriever desire to fetch are good example of behavioral trait. Predisposition to a medical condition and increased risk of getting a certain type of disease is a type of trait that can be passed from parent to children. Some examples of such disease include sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, heart disease, cancer, certain type of mental illness, the heart disease risk. What define our trait? The instructions encoded in our gene play a role in defining trait, but the non-genetic or environmental influences in our lives are just as important in shaping our trait. What define our trait? Physical trait, genetic. Our gene determine our natural hair color. Environment, exposure to sun or hair dye can easily change that color. Behavioral trait, genetic. People breed retriever to chase things and bring them back. Environment, you can train a retriever to instead roll over and play dead when you toss a ball. What define our trait? Predisposition to a medical condition, genetic. A person may be born with an increased risk of heart disease. Environmental, eating healthy foods and exercising can reduce this risk. The normal heart disease risk. How are our traits determined? Try to bend your thumb backward at the joint. Some people can form at least a 45-degree angle, which is called Hitchhiker. Some other people have straight thumb which don't bend in the way. Which one do you have? Scientists describe the set of genetic information for each form as allele, pronounced allele. We can describe the straight thumb allele with an H. How are our traits determined? Each of us has two alleles for thumb extension trait. As a result, we all have one of these combinations: H capital, H capital, H capital, H small, H small, H small, H capital, H small. You can probably guess the trait in people who have two of the same allele. Those with H capital will have a straight thumb. Those with H small will have Hitchhiker thumb. Scientists use the word homozygous, pronounced homozygous, to describe having two of the same allele for a trait: H capital, H capital, H small, H small, H capital, H small. How are our traits determined? But what about people who have one of each allele, H plus H small? Will they have one straight thumb and one Hitchhiker thumb? How are our traits determined? No, when two different alleles are present, they interact for the thumb extension trait. The H allele mask the H small allele, H capital allele. People with the H small, in this case, the H allele is called the dominant and the masked H allele is recessive. Scientists use the word heterozygous, pronounced heterozygous, to describe having two different alleles. How are traits inherited? We have seen how the thumb extension trait shows up in one person, but how is the trait passed from parent to children? The mother and the father each have two alleles for the thumb extension trait, H capital, H small. When they have a child, they pass one of their two alleles to the child. The child trait is determined by the allele she received from the person, H capital, H small, H capital, H small. Each child from those persons have received a different combination of allele. Each child from these parents can receive a different combination of allele, H capital H small, H capital H small. When the first child grow up and has a child of her own, she contributes one of her two allele to each child. Contribute H small, H are all traits inherited. This simply no. Some extension is a well-defined physical trait. Most traits are more complex and can't be tracked through generation this easily. Allele can also work together to produce incomplete dominance. For example, crossing a red carnation plant with a white one can produce pink carnation. One gene, one trait, not often. Traits influenced by just one gene are rare. These are called single gene trait. Most of the time, traits are shaped by more than one gene, and sometimes many. We are all different, but we are very alike. So look around and you will how many different traits people have. Will all have different skin color, hair color, eye color, but underneath the surface people are remarkably alike. All humans share 99.9% identical